Hello and welcome to this panel discussion hosted by ThePrint. We are going to be talking about this really fascinating topic, which is catalyzing India's growth through digital public goods. Now, public goods, it's a boom area in India right now. The government is doing a lot in it, and as is the private sector and non-profits. The area is of great importance to everybody, and so this panel discussion is timely, and the panelists we have are absolutely stellar people working in this space, and they can lend us a lot of perspective about this and how India can, well, first of all, what has happened so far and how India can move forward. So with that, let me get on with it. I'll first start with a little bit of an introduction on the topic and setting the context for India. And then I'll get on to the introductions of our panelists, and we'll go on to questions after that. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this panel discussion. So India leads the world in being one of the largest digital ecosystems. And as one of the pioneers, India also has the richest and the most diverse data sets in the world, which provides the foundation and presents the opportunity to build a very robust digital public infrastructure, not only for us here in India, but also for the world. So a strong foundation of technology infrastructure, the large scale creation of digital public goods, which are DPGs as they're called, in the form of open source software, open data sets, open standards, and open content that's freely available for use and can be shared and adapted to meet the various needs of different communities. It's put India on the a very fast path towards becoming a truly digital nation. Now, these assets have been key in promoting economic growth, social development, and innovation in this digital age that we're in. And I must say also that it's been absolutely key in helping the government reach out to the people that needed aid during the pandemic. I think that use case cannot be understated enough, because a lot of people were in a very dire position during the pandemic, and the government could reach them because it had the digital capabilities to do so through Aadhar, Jandhan, and the mobile application, the Jam Trinity, as it were. So success stories in India's technology ecosystem, which includes the India Stack. It's India Stack it's an open set of APIs that the government of India developed to enable digital applications and services for welfare access and service delivery. This includes things like Aadhar, and it's been used for financial inclusion, identity verification, and paperless transactions, something that the government is very keen on promoting. Now, as of March 2021, 1.8 billion bank accounts have been linked to Aadhar. That's billion with a B, and it's a huge number, and over 15 lakh crore has been transferred through the DBT system to beneficiaries, which leads to significant savings for the government itself in terms of the cost of transactions, and also of course helps a lot of people get the necessary support that's needed. Another example of digital public infrastructure that the government has created, again this is pandemic linked, is the CoWIN app and the digital platform, which was developed for managing and tracking the country's COVID-19 vaccination program. And this led to so far 1.6 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines being administered through the platform. Again, this is a billion. These are very massive numbers. So in today's panel discussion, we will be diving deep into how technology has and can further lead to India's development journey. And now we get to our illustrious panel, and I'll start with the introductions. I'll start with Mr. Pramod Bhasin. Now, Mr. Bhasin is one of India's pioneering businessmen and entrepreneurs. He's widely known for his stellar contribution to the growth and development of the Indian IT industry. He is the founder and is the former CEO of Genpact, a really key organization in India's digital transformation story. and he currently serves as the chairman of the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, or ICRIER, where he has been absolutely instrumental in driving the organization's research and policy agenda, particularly in areas such as international trade and digital economy. Next, we have Mr. Shankar Maruwada, who is the CEO and co-founder of EkStep, and he's absolutely passionate about addressing social problems at scale, and he's shown this through his work at EkStep, and trying to address social problems through technology-based tools. He's an entrepreneur and marketing professional with a wide range of experience working on large-scale projects such as the Aadhar system, where he was the head of demand generation and marketing. He also pioneered data analytics in India through Marketix, a company that he co-founded. And he's an investor in startups and a mentor to entrepreneurs, which, right now is such a key and in-demand skill that people need. We talk about the startup boom that's happening in India, the unicorns that are coming up, but very little is talked about the need for experienced and knowledgeable people to lead this, discussion and to help these companies grow and be sustainable. Then we, of course, last but not the least at all, is Ms. Sudha Srinivasan, who leads the Center for Social Innovation at the Nudge Institute, which is a development action organization focused on resilient livelihoods for all. It's a key topic that all of us should be actively engaging with. And so Sudha, actually, she works with governments, markets, and civil society to bring this about, to create awareness and to drive this mission forward. A key initiative from her center is the Indian Administrative Fellowship, which brings senior executives from the corporate sector to serve alongside principal secretaries of state departments to promote livelihood opportunities across various sectors. Now, this confluence of the private sector and the public sector is something that India desperately needs, and the work that Sudha is doing is instrumental in this. So thank you all so much for joining us for this panel discussion. I will start with a question. I will pose it to all of you. I'll start with Mr. Bhasin. And so what is the role of technology in the context of India's development? How has the digital public goods landscape evolved over the last decade or so in India? And how can it be leveraged to promote, inclusion-based social development? And an extension of this question would be that what do you think has driven the digital revolution in India so far?
Thank you very much. It's a joy to be here, and especially with my fellow panelists and a very distinguished fellow panelists. So wonderful to be here. It's a big, huge question. We are the most digitally savvy country in some ways, but the fact has remained in the past that our digital penetration, while we could say there were 800 million smartphones and so on and so forth, is actually in use of digital goods was very low. And I think, I don't know if you've seen this recent ad which came out in the newspapers as to how many users account for how much proportion of total UPI payments, etc.
Yes.
Which is very eye-opening. And I think we've got to keep that in mind. But what I think is happening in India, to me, is the most exciting thing that I have seen in my business career. And I'm serious about that. I'm not making that up for the sake of this, but I'm really serious. Because what the leapfrogging that we are doing with digital public goods as part of a vision of building the virtual highway in India, as opposed to the physical highways, is incredibly compelling. I have just come back from the US 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the US is an amazing economy, so resilient, bouncing back so fast already at this point in time. But the fact is, we still have our vaccination cards on a little piece of paper signed in by the pharmacist. The bank and the banking system and the way it works is still archaic. There are so many things. The healthcare system doesn't work with each other at all. I think India can take a leapfrog here and frankly be the model for many developing countries to leapfrog past their own handicaps of physical infrastructure. And I hope and see that the way this will be developed, particularly the government developing it in partnership with people like Nandan, who Shankar and others, of course, know very well, and of course, Sudha, you know, but I Spirit and so many others, is we will never produce enough doctors and nurses to reach all the people we need to in India across all the villages. So the ability to use a digital infrastructure to be able to provide that kind of support to tier 5, tier 6 towns, small villages everywhere, places which you can't reach by foot, by car, etc., where a doctor will never go, is phenomenal. Think about education and the revolutionary impact this could have. And I'm really hoping it does, because honestly, no country in the world has progressed much without revolutionizing their education system. No country. We haven't done it yet. And I think this is the chance by which we can do it. Otherwise, it would have been very painful and very slow. So I think the role we are playing here is very far-reaching and visionary, because it's a unique effort. I do talk to people in Europe and the US about it, and most of them look at me wonderingly and saying, why would a government do that? Why wouldn't, Google or Facebook or somebody else do it? And my point to them is, you build roads for your people, you build schools for your people, we build virtual infrastructure for our people. And that, I think, is defining for India today. And I think this could be one of the most exciting chapters for India, where we unleash, with ONDC, entrepreneurship at a scale we haven't seen before. It's early days, it'll take time. But in core areas, education, financial services, healthcare, commerce, SMEs, we now have the chance to transform it, and we've done it frugally. So what I love about the fact is that, imagine the West or a developed country trying to build out the Aadhar program. They would have spent about 20 times more money and not got the penetration and reach, which thanks to Shankar and others, we've been able to get. So truly exciting, truly path-breaking, the stuff that people will talk about in future. Like they talk about China's manufacturing, they will talk about India's digital revolution for the world, I hope.
Fantastic. And Ms. Srinivasan, your take on this, do you have anything to add on, how we can go ahead and leverage, or new technologies or older technologies repackaged and realigned towards the country's development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think no one could have said it better than Pramod. Once the infrastructure comes into place, the cars will come too, right? So what we are seeing alongside the development of digital public infrastructure, which is such a distinguishing feature of India's digital economy, right? Unlike most countries that saw their digital economies flourish because of the boom of private corporations, large tech, India's economy is powered by digital goods that are public in nature.
Right.
And in this process, what it has created is a very fertile ground for a lot of last mile innovations solving hyperlocal problems. So the journey I have been very, very fortunate to witness from very close quarters with the support of people like Shankar, who are mentors to these entrepreneurs.
Right.
Is the new genre of non-profit tech entrepreneurs who are solving for education, health, farmer advisory, fueling the artisan economy, creating better linkages to capital, to markets for small producers across the country, creating vernacular AI vernacular content in both textual and voice formats for vernacular AI, which really is on the poise of taking off. Bringing this power of digital public assets to the very last mile. Like, who could have imagined poultry and goatry in places like Lohardaga and Barabanki be powered through AI? And that is happening in the same generation as AI solving first world problems.
Absolutely.
Amazing fertile grounds for entrepreneurs to solve problems. The other aspect is how wonderfully governments at state levels in the central ministries have opened doors for this kind of public-private participation. Right? So in the same generation, we have senior technocrats, CIOs, CTOs who have led large-scale digital transformations in the private sector, now collaborating with civil servants and accelerating the pace at which this private sector innovation finds its pathways into public systems.
Right.
Which is what we are seeing through the Indian Administrative Fellowship. Very, very interesting and exciting times indeed.
Right. And Mr. Maruwada, there's actually something that Ms. Srinivasan said that resounded with me, that is there really this rise of a group of entrepreneurs or a class of entrepreneurs who are in this not for the profit, but actually for the work itself, that would truly be revolutionary.
Yes, and that to me is one of the most exciting things, right? And if you trace the journey, and if you go back to the question on the role of technology, the evolution of India's DPG,
right?
The context of these new tech entrepreneurs has to be seen in light of the developments of the last decade plus.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, over the last 3 decades, it's now shown how mobile phones allowed us to leapfrog an entire generation of communication, right?
Right.
Replace mobile phones with technology in general. Replace communication with development in general.
Right.
Technology is allowing India to leapfrog several generations of development and go straight into a digital society.
I understand.
In 2009, all of this was science fiction when we started working on Aadhar, or then known as UIDAI.
Yes.
But an important thing there is, in a digital society, collaboration happens through exchange of information.
Absolutely.
The reason you're able to press a few buttons on Swiggy and still get a physical pizza is because complex information has been exchanged between multiple stakeholders, right? Which means the small entrepreneur who has a mobile now has a choice of, do I go with Swiggy or Zomato or whatever?
Right.
Right. The point here is this evolution took more than a decade for India, starting with Aadhar, where the proposition was simple, but very counterintuitive for most policymakers. One, a lot of government services and private services start, the first step is, who are you?
Right.
Once that is answered, let set of other things, ultimately, that results in a delivery of a service. So our proposition was, we will do one thing and one thing only. Answer the question of, are you who you say you are?
Right.
Right. Now, with anything, it was a 1-year battle to convince people. What happened with this was, once we had that base of Aadhar, on that, you could create a next layer of payments. Foundational identity, payments, whether it is Aadhar-enabled payment systems or UPI, all that.
Right.
Once you had these two, you could then think of digital documents, e-sign, DigiLocker.
Right.
When you put these 3 things together, it is no different from the Silicon Valley era of government of US creating internet first, HTTP protocols and packet switching. Clinton, before he demoted office, talking about GPS, right? And then you had a whole explosion of things on top. The reason I'm saying all of this is the rise of the tech entrepreneur is because a lot of these digital infrastructure has been laid in the country.
Right.
Which allows people to think of how they can use technology without needing to have very deep pockets, which allows them to think of, as Sudha said, last mile solutioning. Right? And seeing the success of some of these infrastructure and their winning implementations, we know the numbers: Aadhar 1.35 billion, UPI 8 billion transactions a month, $360 billion of direct benefit transfer, $27 billion of saving to the country because of Aadhar, which cost only 1.5 billion. So all of this have now seeped in, right? On the ground, what we are seeing is people asking, so how do I use it?
Correct.
Whether it be for-profit entrepreneurs or not-for-profit entrepreneurs, they are digital natives, the young generation, right? So they're saying, I have a road, right? I have all this infrastructure. What can I do with it? That, to me, unleashes a massive entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm using entrepreneurial in the true spirit of the word, not for profit or for independent of for profit or not for profit.
I understand.
And I think that is going to unleash such a powerful force, right? We will literally see history being made in the next 2 decades.
Fantastic. That's actually very inspirational. And so now coming to you again, Mr. Bhasin, we've now mentioned several digital public goods like Aadhar and DigiLocker that have been set up. But in your view, what are some of the other successful digital public goods initiatives that have actually worked and that have impacted society at large?
Yes, I think we've. I love the conversation here because I think I agree totally. It's revolutionary, and in India, this will be the most exciting part when we think back on history. I may not be around, but I think the world still doesn't adequately recognize the revolution that Aadhar was, right? Because the real secret sauce at Aadhar was how they were able to create, Shankar and Nandan would create a pull for it from the public, right? So that the public needed it. The public came out to demand, because otherwise trying to push it out to 1.2 billion people would never happen, right? It's like fighting gun laws in America. It ain't gonna happen, right? At this point in time. Whereas I think what Aadhar was able to do through that pull factor is get to the people, and now everybody can say, who are you? And you can answer that question. There is a very good quote, which forgive my levity. In Delhi, a lot of people said, "Tujhe pata nahi main kaun hu," and now one of the guys can say, "I'll show me Aadhar card, main bata dunga aapko." Finally you answered that question. Aapko pata nahi main kaun hu? Correct. But I think going beyond that, I'll give you a tiny example, if I may, on healthcare. With the public goods that we're setting up and the infrastructure we're setting up for healthcare, to be able to exchange information, to carry electronic medical records, to be able to access them from any point that you want, for the government to access them anonymized, to be able to forecast and use the analytics behind it to forecast disease spread, where do you need the medicines, shortages, et cetera, et cetera. It builds a nationwide information system that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And right, so nobody else in the world has any, even the NHS has nothing like this. It has legacy systems which don't talk to each other, where if you want information, it's very hard to collect it. But now, tiny example, if I may, most patients stay in hospital after surgery because they need to be monitored. That's the only reason. There's no other reason why they're there. So they stay on 2 or 3 days, 4 days, because some nurse, some doctor. Well, now, if you can put all that information onto that infrastructure, you will get 100 different companies providing that service, so that you can go home and be monitored at home by one of these companies. It relieves pressure on the hospital, it relieves pressure on the nurses and the doctors, and it allows 100 other people to become entrepreneurs. Personally, I think it is important that these entrepreneurs make money, that they are profitable, because that's the only thing that will sustain them. But it allows 1,000 new ideas to come to the fore. So I think in those core areas, we will begin to see very soon, in the next 3 to 5 years, a fantastic availability, access to information for patients, which can transform the quality of healthcare that they get. Similarly with education, I'm part of Asha Impact, which is a impact investment fund, a small fund that we're setting up. We've been working on it for 8 years. And now when I see some of the companies there which are using this this technology infrastructure, for instance, to teach education. So we have a company which teaches 100,000 kids every day on government entrance exams, right? Purely virtually, purely through digital goods, purely, I'll step back. Let's step back and remember that the biggest digital good in the world is the internet, right? It's free. Mm-hmm. Imagine if somebody had started charging for it when they first, Mr. Lee Brenners, or I've forgotten his full name, had started saying, "I'll patent it," and charging it. And imagine how much damage that would have caused the world. Right. This public goods and the concept, I think in these areas is very powerful and this is the last mile innovation that Sudha was talking about, which we haven't been able to solve for in decades. And now suddenly you can see a way to start solving for it on your mobile phone, on your little iPad, or whatever else it may be that you have access to. So to me, these are there's 20 such examples that I wish I was 20 years old again.
Right. So now, Ms. Srinivasan, we've talked about last mile several times now. So what do you see as being the current challenges in the effective development and adoption of digital technology in the last mile? And how can we go about mitigating these?
Yeah. So innovations at the last mile need to happen in the same generation as solutions for the first world, right? That's the problem statement we're taking on. Basically, for them to happen in the same generation means that you don't waste 10 years waiting for trickle down to happen when all the stars line up. You do it today because there's a sense of urgency to solve these last mile problems. Otherwise, as we have seen in other parts of the world, inequality could very quickly spiral out of control, right? So that's what you want to stop.
Yes.
So the solutions are required, I think, at both ends. One is, continuing to invest in this digital public infrastructure build out. For instance, if you take a non-economically attractive sector, not an e-commerce business or a SaaS kind of sector, but say agriculture or livestock management, or the artisan economy, you need the infrastructure that goes all the way from unique identifiers for the producer, geo-referenced village maps, real-time crop data, right? You need all pieces of the stack, and there's a lot of work yet to be done in building that out. You see the central ministries, state government starting to invest in this significantly, but the state needs capacity. Right? Like with Aadhar and everything else that has been built out, it has been created by technologists who are socially conscious, had a sense of service, probably gave up far more lucrative opportunities and came and built this out for the country. We need the people and we need the mechanisms within government to absorb them. That's a huge need. And then finally, at the last mile, you need the entrepreneurs. For instance, those of you who saw the Karigar Clinic episode on Shark Tank, for example, right? There's an example of entrepreneurs who helped Pubby Bain, a producer of embroidery, who in turn employs a few hundred such women from very, very impoverished backgrounds otherwise, but very skilled at what they do. That's the last mile entrepreneur. And if they had access to ONDC and other such digital goods, they could put this whole work on steroids and scale countrywide. Right? So you need problem solvers at the last mile. The sector needs to become attractive for technologists who do this not just with a sense of charity and wanting to do good. It's not just service, but it is problem solving at the last mile. So I think both sides need to step up, and we need to make it possible, make it easy, create a nurturing environment in which all of this can happen. that's a big part of what we do at the Center for Social Innovation at the Nudge.
Right. And so now, Mr. Maruwada, actually building on exactly that point, how can the government encourage the private sector and civil society to actually come forward and work in these areas? What are the kind of nudges that they can put in place that can enhance this kind of collaboration?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And again, building off what Pramod said and Sudha said, and I'll explain with two examples so that it becomes contextual.
Mm-hmm.
In Aadhar, the design was thought of, as Pramod said, as to how do you create pull? How do you create demand? How do you leverage the existing large ecosystem of enrollment agencies, central state thing? And within government, central government, there are so many departments. So by choosing to do something very minimal, it created demand from other departments. Other departments said that, hey, if you can say somebody is who they are, I will then use it to say, are they eligible for a direct benefit? Are they eligible for some scholarship, etc. Mm-hmm. Now, states said that, look, if you are creating that, I will be in charge of enrolling my people. And the enrollment design was such that it is the private for-profit enrolling agencies who anyway do this. They were contracted, but the incentives were aligned for everyone, that it was only outcome-based payment and not input-based payment. So you had a whole bunch of enrolling agencies coming in. Then, as part of enrollment, there were NGOs who were focused on, say, the differently able, making sure that they were brought to the enrollment agency so that they get a number. Right. And then once the enrollment was done, agencies like Reliance Jio and others said that, hey, I can use this authentication for my own purposes. So Reliance Jio went from 0 to 100 million subscribers in 6 months. But because the eKYC part was now pretty much instant and free of cost, right? Zerodha allowed many investors to directly participate because eKYC was there. Second example, and I think, Pramod, on education, there is an Aadhar of education already, and EkStep Foundation, where, by the way, my co-founders are Nandan Nilekani and Rohini. So we partnered with the government of India, where we created a digital public good called Sunbird. Think of it like
this is EkStep that did
as
this?
EkStep Foundation.
All right.
As EkStep Foundation, we partnered with the government of India to create a open source technology called Sunbird, which is a digital public good. Mm-hmm. We then helped the government to create a platform using Sunbird called Diksha. So Sunbird is a digital public good. When you instantiate it and provide a service, Diksha is that, and Diksha is a digital public infrastructure, right? Because Diksha is providing a service. Diksha is also an infrastructure where the state governments can use it to provide digital content, to train their teachers with verifiable credentials, to assess children, to enable teachers to conduct micro improvements. And each of these are like a series of building blocks.
Right.
This allows solutions to be created on the state. What does that mean? In the last 6 years, as a country, we have had 61 billion, that's B as in Bharat, minutes of learning, 300,000 plus pieces of digital content in 32 languages available free of cost to anybody to use, 140 million verifiable credentials, which is around 8 million teachers trained by the respective state departments, states, and who are working with NGOs. So how can government work? The model which we are abstracting from more than a decade of such kind of experiences is this. One, government creates the policy because they are the largest NGO in the world, in the country, right? The government of India is the largest NGO in the country. They are keen to solve problems for 1.3 billion people or 1.4. Inclusion is what they have to do. So they create the policy. They create the rules for the playground, right? Digital infrastructure can be created either philanthropically, let's say like EkStep Foundation, or by private players who volunteer, say iSpirit, or like us from the private sector who were part of government, or by government itself. There are many examples of that. So there is a digital public infrastructure. The key is, unlike a lot of the normal NGO world, where we do something, if it works, we scale it up.
Mhm.
When you're designing for population scale digital public infrastructure, from the get-go, you have to think about a lot of things: privacy, data, administrative boundaries, legal, respecting the laws of the land, right? Unintended consequences. Because you cannot build a road every 100 meters every 1 year, right? Because you have to think through the whole thing right from the beginning. So 3 parts to this, therefore. I've talked about policy, which has to think forward.
Mhm.
One has to think of digital infrastructure. And the third and most important, one has to think about how innovation can happen on top of these digital roads by governments, digital benefit transfer. And we saw during COVID, there's an inclusion focus there. $4 billion transferred instantly to 160 million people, like that.
Absolutely.
No checks, no worrying whose signature will be on the checks like in the US, right? 200 million women into whose bank account straight money was sent, not to the men, to the women. Policy, right? Inclusion, government focus. Profit, the bazaar focus. And they will do what they do. And any people who are missed out by both, marginalized, right? Or innovation for the not-profit sector, that's where the Samaj comes in.
Right.
So policy, infrastructure, innovation, these are in continuing cycles. So that is how I believe government can work with the private sector and civil sector to promote both the creation and the use of technology.
I understand. And now we've talked about the role of government quite a bit. So, Mr. Bhasin, I have this question for you. Should digital public infrastructure, should the driving force be a kind of top-down approach where the central government is driving it? Or should it be the state governments taking the lead, because each state has its own unique use cases and requirements?
I hope the government will sincerely think about doing this in a manner that is seamless and really preserves the essence of a seamless transaction and the public infra goods allowing you to do work frictionless, which is such an important part of new entrepreneurs and new businesses.
Right.
2, in terms of center versus state, I really believe this entire ecosystem needs to be driven by its own demand. So it's got to be responsive to the market, and the market must lead it, because that's how you'll really get market acceptance, and you'll get market players coming in, you'll get entrepreneurs innovating, and that's how innovation typically happens. Most innovation does happen. The center plays a very critical role to preserve the integrity of the digital infrastructure and to deal with all the issues that Shankar talked about: privacy, security, data issues, breaches, contractual issues, how to make sure it remains free, how to make sure it remains sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
At the state level also, I think there will be many ways they can use it, but I think the basic infrastructure will remain the same. Every state should use it for all the things that it has state control over: education, healthcare, so many others, distribution of Manrega money, distribution of skills development money, etc. It can use that. One area which is missing, which we haven't talked about, there are 2 areas missing, which we haven't talked about. One area which is very important is actually the fact that we haven't put employment onto these platforms. Now, there are good reasons for that, but imagine if we could create something which allowed states and everybody else to create an employment exchange at scale for a variety of different skills, etc., etc. That would be fantastic. And two, I hope someday we can really work extensively with the government and the center and state to digitize them. They really end up holding up a huge part of our development in our country.
Absolutely.
And I hope we can really help them digitize their own processes, their own people, the time it takes to get a file through, the time it takes to get approval, the time it takes to get paid, by the way. Try getting money out of a government department. I mean, nobody talks about this stuff, but the fact is that is a non-starter most of the time and for an average entrepreneur. And I think if we can solve for some of those things, it'll be great. But I think the states...
Sorry, about this payment.
Please. The states can play a huge role, particularly in the domains that they have under their control. Health is a big issue for them, right? Can you use that and how effectively different states will use? But most of all, I think it has to be market-driven, market demand-driven. And it has to show people that, hey, you can be somewhat profitable if you do this, and you can build a real business using these goods with greater transparency than we've ever had before in the building of businesses, and that to me brings in much more organized sector business development. Imagine training like we train teachers at EkStep. Imagine training healthcare professionals on these platforms across the board. We need 1 million of them. Imagine having them trained and available to provide their services. They can be rated, they can be trained, they can be hired, they can offer their services, they can do 1,000 things under any of these domains.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so now, unfortunately, even though this has been a very fascinating discussion, we are running out of time. So I'm going to get to the closing comments for each of you on, the scope and the future of technology and how this collaboration between Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar can lead to the development of the country, the inclusion, the financial inclusion that's needed, and the service delivery that is so sorely needed in the country. So I will start with Mr. Maruwada. Your closing comments, please.
Yeah. What I've come to realize is technology changes behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because technology offers certain capabilities that we could not with the mobile phone, internet, GPS, right? So these capabilities are used by people to provide solutions. When I use those solutions, my behavior changes. I can order a pizza in a minute. Why do I have to struggle so much to pay my taxes? Okay, let's digitize that, right?
Right.
So the behavior of the citizen, their aspirations, their mindset changes. Why am I still? So Sudha's point about that is so third world, right? So technology creates capabilities, ability to prove ID, ability to pay, ability to verify credentials. People build solutions on top of this infrastructure. When that is successful and demand is there, it is adopted, usage changes behavior. Behavior changes needs. That creates new innovation, new capabilities. So this cycle, right, is moving very, very fast. First point. Mm-hmm. Second, think of each of these capabilities as letters and the DPIs as vowels. Now, if you remember Scrabble, the more letters you have, the more vowels you have, the more words you can create. Absolutely. Right? That more and more complex. So India is developing a magnificent array of vowels and alphabets, which is digital capabilities. Mm-hmm. We are the global leaders in using DPI as a country, right? May not be physical infrastructure, but digital infrastructure for sure. Right. And as part of some G20 conversations, yesterday there was a delegation from Singapore who heard all of this and said, wow, this is India's best kept secret.
Why is it a secret though?
They were not aware of all of this.
They haven't read it.
Right? And as Pramod said, those who have heard of it, they can't grasp their mind around it, whether they're in US or Europe. How is this possible? what do you mean a government is doing something that we associate the big tech to do?
Yeah.
Right? It's only when they come to India, they see the coconut seller casually accepting digital money as if, not even bothering to check it, right? And a coconut is purchased without any device except a QR code. When they see in the airports, people casually walking through because of Digi Yatra, casually showing their driving license on their phone, Digi Locker.
Right.
That strikes, oh, this is real. Yeah, obviously we can do a better job of marketing and, that's all there. But the point is, we are seeing history being created in front of our eyes.
Fantastic.
And Sudha's point, first world technologies like AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are imagining how we can use that for our problems of inclusion. And therefore, demonstrating to the world that it is possible to solve the conundrum of innovation and inclusion for a country as large and diverse as India by leveraging technology and not being afraid of it as the big bad wolf in some countries, or
Right.
going completely gung-ho that leave technology in the hands of the private players and they will sort it out. Government should completely get out of the way, right? So we have a unique opportunity. Imagine if Silicon Valley was a country and if instead of private innovation, we're talking of a country level innovation.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity in front of us in the next 2 decades.
Absolutely. And Ms. Srinivasan, your concluding remarks?
This whole conversation has been so exciting.
Really has.
Drawing from Pramod's comments on, let markets take the wheel and drive it.
Mm-hmm.
Shankar's comment that government is indeed the largest funder of welfare. It is just coming out so strongly that the unifying force for both these players is in how we contribute to creating digital public infrastructure and how we leverage it and draw from it as government, as markets to maximize gains. And then comes the very interesting role, therefore, that civil society plays. There are segments of the population that markets still have not been able to reach.
Right.
Sometimes even governments are not able to reach. And there comes civil society to be that glue to kind of do the work that is required to be done where there is no money to be made. Right? And that's the whole thesis of inclusive development. And all of it is running on, well, not all, but a very, very large part of it is running because of the existence of this massive digital infrastructure that all three players have put together. So I'm personally excited by the sheer number of opportunities that have come into play for a socially conscious, technology savvy person that wants to contribute to India's development, right? If you're entrepreneurial and want to start up, here's this wonderful space. If you want to work inside government, with government, there's a space. All you need to do is, throw your hat in the ring, do it with strong intent. And I think there's almost a guarantee that this work will be far more fulfilling, far more good use of the strengths and muscles that you've built as a technologist than most opportunities that a single narrow path in any sector would offer. Exciting times we live in, and glad to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I just wanted to add a phrase, which is a very pithy way, and I did not talk about before. The best role of Samaj is it steps in where markets won't and governments can't.
Yes.
So the more we can increase what governments can, private sector participation, Indian administration fellowship, the more we can increase what markets will, ability to give low outlay services to reach the poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
The role of Samaj then becomes to help the other two, in addition to filling in the gaps where none of them can or will. So in India, we're seeing a very healthy potential for these three pillars to work together.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And Mr. Bhasin, your closing remarks.
Sure. And again, thank you for this panel. It's wonderful. Really love being here. I think the world, I hope, will recognize the contribution India can make to the development of many other countries in this manner, because it's unprecedented and it's a brand new idea. Why would governments only focus on building the physical infrastructure? Why not help build the virtual infrastructure? And I think that will unleash 1 million entrepreneurs across this country over the next 5 to 10 years. I do think there is hurdles that we should be very conscious of. One is awareness. We need to increase awareness and real internet penetration in our country. Right now, we talk a lot about big numbers, but the fact is that many people can't use it. It's inadequate. The connectivity is inadequate, et cetera, et cetera. Let's not gloss over these issues, okay? I think it's very important that we solve for them, because otherwise what will happen, what I don't want happening is that the people at the bottom of the pyramid, or people in smaller towns, or people without connectivity, tend to start losing out because they don't have the same leverage. Now, that will happen in the market economy anyway, but I hope we can significantly enhance the awareness of what these digital public goods can do for people across the board and how they can use them. And if my one suggestion to everyone who's been working on this would be, please, if there's a way to show people or increase awareness, I think that would be very valuable. And two, government needs to get reformed the same way. Our government systems are archaic, and I hope that these digital infrastructures will also allow us to make a difference to the workings of our government, which then can truly make that triumvirate come together in a way that is highly productive for all of us.
Right, and absolutely wonderfully said. And so, the kind of analogy that comes to my mind is, a jumbo jet, an aircraft, which, it's done taxiing and it's now approaching the proper runway. And just before it starts the proper takeoff, the pilot kind of, makes the engines go to full power, and the plane starts vibrating with potential energy. So that, I feel, is where digital public infrastructure in India is right now. And we just need to ensure that we get everybody on the plane.
That's right.
We can't leave anybody off the plane. The government, I guess, needs to kind of remove blocks in front of this plane. And anytime now, we're just going to push forth the pedal and the plane's just going to shoot ahead and take off. It's actually been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. And for all of our viewers here, I'd also like to urge you once again to look at the Indian Administrative Fellowship, which is a program by the Nudge Institute. You can go to their website and check it out. It's very, very, very useful, important, and impactful. Please do go and check it out. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us, the people watching, and also, of course, our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation.